fantasy short stories. Of Monsters and Mushrooms by Lesley Herron. Chapter 5, Tornado-Ravaged Trailer Park. As unpleasant as the previous night had been, the sounds, the smells, the screams, Vel would have happily done it all again to avoid any conversation with the man standing before him. In the 10 years since his death and consequent rebirth, a deep resentment had soured Vel against the individual who had been responsible for both. Just the mere sight of those happy, if awestruck, blue eyes forced a rumbling growl from his throat.
Eric.
Frowning, Eric didn't miss the cantankerous tone his brother wove through each letter of his name, but he overlooked it and stepped closer to the cell. Even after all the time that had passed, he still found it jarring to see the man he had crafted in Vel's place.
"What are you doing in here?"
he asked with a frown as he approached. Mechanical fingers wrapped around the bars as Vel leaned in, pressing his face closer, the metal plates fused to his cheeks clinking against them in the silence. He peered through mismatched eyes at the man who had destroyed his life. Their gazes were locked, one filled with concern, and the other a deep-seated loathing, until the tension grew thick between them.
"Oh, you know."
Vel pulled away, waving his mechanical hand flippantly at his surroundings.
"Just a typical Wednesday. Right, Frankie?"
Ignoring the snide remark, and groaning internally, Eric glanced up at the tall guard standing beside him.
"How much longer is he in for?"
11 days. Dislocated a bouncer's jaw down at the greasy hubcap.
Frankie's confirmation had Eric reaching up to pinch the bridge of his nose again.
"Damn it, Vel."
With a deep sigh, he freed his quickly draining credit chit and slapped it into the guard's massive open hand.
"Don't bother. I don't need an early checkout."
Vel turned his back on his brother, tossing his hands behind his head to stare up at the lone barred window some 6 feet above his head. A dull, fetid beam of electric light poured in from the false sun outside.
"I'll enjoy all 11 of those days."
He glanced over his shoulder.
"Without you."
Despite the prisoner's insistence on staying, Frankie took the card anyway, a devilish grin spreading across his face.
"I'll bring you a receipt."
Why did that sound like a threat? Eric's thoughts twisted his features into confusion, and he waved the guard away.
"You think I would just leave you in here?"
His brother had lazily spun back around to face him.
"I'd prefer it if you did."
Vel shrugged.
"It's not so bad. I get a roof over my head."
He waved his hand towards the ceiling and its deep cracks.
"A bed?"
The stone slab he gestured to was bare of any sheets or blankets, not even a pillow.
"And 1 square meal a day."
He smiled, though the tray near the opening at his feet hadn't been touched.
"I'm perfectly comfortable here."
Do you know how disappointed Mom would be if she could see... Eric's words were knocked from his mouth as Vel's mechanical hand shot out, grabbed him by the lapel of his overshirt, and yanked him forward, slamming his body against the bars and rattling his teeth.
"See me?"
He finished his brother's words with a growl.
"It's been 10 years, Eric. You know as well as I do, in her condition, she's probably dead. You promised me we wouldn't be gone long. 10 years.
Wincing at the accusation, coupled with the pain of having his face compressed against unforgiving metal bars, Eric put his hands up in a placating gesture.
"That's why I'm here,"
he grunted as he attempted to push himself even just an inch away, but his brother's grip was too strong.
"It hasn't been 10 years. Arthur, how long has it been?"
A haptic buzz flared behind his eye, vibrating his inner eardrum in the tone of a cartoonish, over-the-top British butler, matching the text that scrolled across his visual interface.
9 years, 2 months, 14 days, 7 hours, 22 minutes, and 42 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Vel relinquished his brother, the tone of his words implying that he certainly was not apologetic.
It's only been 9 years, 2 months, 14 days, 7 hours, and 22 minutes.
And 53 seconds.
Vel rolled his eyes.
But who's counting?
Wait a minute! Attila bounced forward. You have an ARTHER ocular companion? He lifted the leather eye patch over his left eye, showing off his own glowing mechanical peeper. We're like eye buddies! Vel frowned.
What?
You have a slightly outdated model. It's missing the broad frequency scanners, some of the endocrine controls, and the expanded font options. But the 0384-B6 is still a solid choice. Attila pointed through the bars after studying the surly man's bright magenta-colored eye for a split second. I upgraded my Arthur, and now she's got a sexy voice. And a speaker. He paused, pushing his finger smack into the middle of his eye, depressing the semi-squishy lens with an audible click.
My name is Veronica. How may I be of assistance?
The voice that emanated from his eye was indeed alluring, a sultry Irish accent, an oxymoron in itself, and more than likely a bad pun. Briggs' face went a little pale.
Attila, you know how I feel about you touching your eyeball like that.
Attila repeated the gesture, much to the displeasure of Brigg, and silenced his synthetic seductress. She gets annoying real fast, though, so I keep her on mute. He grinned in a way that didn't quite meet his eyes. Want me to upgrade yours?
No thanks, Fruit Punch.
Vel shifted his attention to the return of the overlarge guard.
Frankie, visiting hours are over, yeah? I need a nap,
he grumbled, throwing a dark glare at the gangly merc.
Didn't get a wink of sleep last night.
Frankie handed back the now emptied credit chit to its owner and slid a long silver key into the lock.
Nope, you're free to go.
The door opened with a creak, and he stepped back. Eric moved into the space, reaching out to place a hand on Vel's shoulder. He stared at the man, concern twisting his brow.
I thought you were doing better.
He kept his voice low, preventing his words from reaching the others.
I say a lot of stuff to get you to leave.
He slapped away his brother's concern, both physical and verbal.
Maybe if you'd checked on me more than 3 times a year, you'd have realized. But who has time for that?
I'm sorry. Eric sighed in defeat. He should have been a better brother and checked in on him more often. But their relationship was strained after the months and months of rehabilitation following his reconstructive surgery. Weaning Vel off the painkillers had resulted in more arguments than he could count. After a rather horrible blowout, Eric had given Vel his space and turned his focus towards getting them both home in hopes that would placate the man. But, in his desperation to do so, he'd pushed important things to the back burner.
I didn't notice you were struggling.
Ugh! Vel let out a petulant noise of disgust.
I'm fine. Just go away. Go home. That's why I'm here.
Eric stepped further into the cell.
I've got a lead on something that...
He paused, eyeballing Frankie, then leaned in closer to whisper,
something that is possibly using a portal to enter this world.
He reached out, returning his hand to his brother's shoulder.
If it's real, if my theories and calculations are correct, which they usually are, then I could get us both home. Our real home.
Vel froze. Home had become a 4-letter word to him. He looked down at his hands. Before he'd woken up to see the monster he'd been transformed into, he longed to go back there, to return to his old life with his mom and the person he'd left behind. But they were dead now, or had moved on. Shaking out his head, an angry growl rumbled from his throat, and he wrenched his arm away again. Hope was a poisonous barb he refused to allow back into his heart.
Well, have fun.
Vel swiveled on his heel, placing that mechanical hand firmly on his brother's chest, and began forcefully walking him from the cell.
Send me a postcard.
No, wait! Frankie, exhausted from the squabbling and eager to return to his book, pulled back on the one brother and reached into the cell to grab the other. He hauled out the cyborg, setting him firmly on his feet.
The door is over there. Now,
He plastered on a large, fake smile.
leave.
You appear to be having difficulty finding the exit. Would you like me to help plot a course?
Vel whisked away the annoying pop-up that had blossomed in his vision with a flick of his hand before his fingers curled into tight fists. Traversing a war-torn landscape with his brother, Fruit Punch, and Short King over there to hunt down another of Eric's wild theories that never panned out did not appeal to him. He'd rather rot in this prison than subject himself to that particular hell. And with that thought, a beautiful solution washed over him like the warmth of a hot shower on a cold day, bringing a peaceful smile to his face. Vel looked down at his mechanical hand, still clenched into a fist, and then up to the guard.
Sorry, Frankie.
And before the man could finish raising a muscular eyebrow in response, he pulled back on his shoulder and let those knuckles fly. The sickening crunch and a spray of blood told Vel his punch had landed true, and his smile remained even as the world spun off axis when Frankie returned the favor. He landed in a heap back in the middle of his cell, and the doors slammed shut behind him with thunderous finality. Frankie pushed his fingers against the base of his nose, stemming the flow of blood as he turned a murderous glare to the prisoner.
6 more weeks. Half rations.
He then narrowed that gaze at the others.
Visiting hours are over.
Vel chuckled past bloody lips as he lazily waved goodbye. If the trip up to the 32nd floor by elevator had been unpleasant, taking 32 flights of stairs down had been a grueling slog of leg-melting tedium. On the plus side, the time it took them to descend the municipal building had allowed Eric ample opportunity to try and wrap his mind around what had just happened. Though, truth be told, he still couldn't make heads or tails of why his brother had done that. He'd never been good at emotions or feelings. If it couldn't be quantified mathematically, it may as well have been Klingon. Or perhaps a language he didn't speak, like Greek. Why didn't Vel want to join him? Why did he want to stay locked up? And most importantly, what the heck was he supposed to do now? Eric turned to his traveling companions and let out a long sigh.
So now what?
Attila shrugged. I vote we leave him behind and go get rich without him. Frowning, Eric took a different approach.
What would you do if it was Brig locked up in there?
A wicked grin replaced Attila's nonchalant composure.
Wait, never mind.
The merc had begun to pull back his poncho, revealing something tucked beneath, forcing Eric to reach out to stop him before someone else in their party got arrested. Again. He swiveled on his heel to face Brig.
What would you do if Attila was locked up? Typically, I just sit back and wait for the sounds of screaming and gunfire to stop. Then normally one of the walls just explodes and he comes sprinting out yelling something like, "Time to go!"
Brig paused, pulling off his top hat to scratch at his bald scalp.
But I get your point.
After thinking for a moment, he then used that hand to point up to a glowing neon yellow billboard advertisement that stood, large and impressive, above the building across the street.
Since your brother seems reluctant to leave of his own accord, how about something like that?
Eric followed the gesture to see the perfect, dentured smile of a small, wrinkled old woman with a bun of black hair pulled so tight it nearly smoothed out her facial features. She wore a jeweled eye patch and was pointing at the text of the board. The neon lights illuminated it into a waving motion that said,
Granny Sadie's Merc Services, trademark. You don't have it, we'll get it.
He slapped a hand over his mouth to prevent the long, exasperated groan from leaving it.
More Mercs?
Eric's gaze shot between the two already in his company.
You want me to hire more Mercs?
Or, Attila led with a smile, flipping back his poncho to reveal a tactical vest that was more pocket than vest, and each larger pocket had several internal pockets, a dastardly ne'er-do-well's wet dream worth of explosives, mechanical mayhem, rubber ducks, and random devices of ill intent. Veronica's thin mechanical limb moved the items around in a way that clearly only made sense to the robot.
We break him out the old-fashioned way.
Absolutely not.
Brig, without even a second thought, reached over and pulled the poncho back over Attila's skinny body and turned back to their employer.
Here's the deal, Doc. Every merc I've ever met is specialized. While they may have a wide range of skills, they're only truly gifted at one or two things.
He pointed at himself.
For instance, I'm the brains of this operation.
What? Ignoring his buddy's comment, Brig barreled on.
That, and I have a nose for finding the best way out of trouble. Attila over there, well...
He paused, eyeballing his friend.
Aside from getting us into trouble, what are you good at?
Eric waved his hands around, shushing the argument that began to brew between them.
What does this have to do with anything? What I'm saying,
Brig continued, his one hand still gesturing to the billboard,
is that we can hire someone with the right skills to break your brother out of jail. With what money?
Eric's composure snapped like a frayed twine, and he dragged his fingers through his hair.
Between this idiot over here and your black hole of a stomach, I have none.
Don't worry.
Attila waved him off, squinting at the sign and then swiveling off in the direction of the address indicated on the board.
We'll blow up that bridge when we get to it.
Listen.
Brig reached up and put a meaty hand on Eric's shoulder.
You hired us for a reason, and part of that reason is to tell you when you should have hired someone else. So listen to me now, and let's go hire someone who knows what they're doing.
Defeated and willing to try anything at this point, Eric let them lead the way across town. They followed the billboards and posters, plastered on nearly every street corner, that directed them like signs to a garage sale. Only instead of buying someone's unwanted junk, they would be hiring a merc crazy enough to break into prison. The three of them pulled to a stop outside a narrow building that leaned heavily to one side, large beams of wood used to prop up the crooked half. Eric stared up at the hand-painted sign hung between the two windows on the topmost floor that read,
Granny Sadie's.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
Attila, eager to see exactly what these professionals had that he didn't, reached out and pushed open the door. As they stepped inside, Eric reassessed his assumption about it not being a garage sale. The only way he could think to describe the interior would be hoarder's junk drawer meets tornado-ravaged trailer park. Every surface was filled, and I do mean filled, to the brim with stuff. The occasional useful object mixed in with heaps of cheap trinkets and literal garbage. Attila walked by a table that held nothing but gold-plated pistols and brass knuckles, with fake plastic gems scattered between them to make the display more shiny? As if such a glittering array of metallic beauties needed anything more than the price tags to sell them. He looked away, ignoring Veronica as she snatched one of them into the folds of his poncho. Plausible deniability and all that. Several curio cabinets crowded the nearest wall, each shelf holding silly things such as seashells, porcelain music boxes, and landmines. Hanging from the ceiling, every 9 inches, were sparkling crystal baubles, dream catchers, and resin mobiles, the kind that usually hung over a baby's crib. He paused at one, lifting his eye patch to examine it, and laughed to see that the childishly designed rockets were actually painted hand grenades, just like the one he'd grown up with.
Attila!
Briggs' gruff voice cut through the silence, and despite his attempt to keep from startling them all, his buddy jumped. Attila's narrow backside clipped the nearest table, sending a top-heavy figurine of a sexy clown crashing to the ground.
I was just gonna say, don't touch nothing,
Briggs grumbled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Attila let out a nervous chuckle, and at the sound of scuttling feet approaching them, he nudged the broken figurine beneath a floor-length tablecloth.
Welcome, welcome.
A voice rougher than Briggs after a 3-day bender on cheap rotgut and no water announced the arrival of their host, and the three of them turned to watch as the old woman, whose face plastered almost every billboard between here and the municipal building, clambered atop a stool behind a mahogany counter. Standing on the stool brought her eye level with Briggs. The woman was minute, barely over 3 feet tall, if that.
Ah, new customers.
She had the accent of an extra from a bad mobster movie and a gold-toothed grin that sold the part. Granny Sadie placed her cane on the countertop and then shoved 2 fingers into her mouth, letting out a shrill whistle.
Mr. Black, get in here!
She turned back to them.
What can I help you with today? Could I interest you in some fine imported wares?
She swept a hand around the heaps of junk. Eric fumbled forward.
We're just,
Or perhaps tall, dark, and clumsy over there would like to pay for the priceless statue he just hid under the rug.
Whoa! Now that's an eye patch! Attila, in an attempt to change the subject, bounded forward, dodging the clutter of boxes spilling out beneath several tables to bump the doctor out of the way with his hip. He reached out, grasping the edge of the old woman's heavily bejeweled eye patch. Do you have an ocular companion, too? That seems to be the theme around here. Ah! His words turned into a terrified screech as she did not, in fact, have an implant beneath that eye patch. Just jagged, acid-scarred flesh like melted cheese stretching across a blood-filled blind eye. Granny Sadie snatched up her cane and swatted the man upside his head.
Hey!
Smack! Smack!
Didn't your mother ever tell you?
Smack! Smack!
It's impolite to lift up a lady's eye patch without asking.
Briggs removed his hat, tears sparkling at the edge of his vision, and his voice quavered as he uttered,
Mama,
with a sniff. Attila nodded, his face pulling into sympathetic approval. Mama. They would get those flapjacks one of these days. Eric, frowning, returned to the old lady. We're here about the, Merc services?
Ah, you're here to hire yourself a goods retrieval assistant, am I right?
He overlooked the use of her finger quotes, but nodded anyway.
So here's the thing. We need to get my brother out of prison.
Name.
Eric paused as the old woman hoisted a large ledger book onto the counter that could have put Frankie's record tome to shame. When she pulled back on the pages, flipping it open, the resulting thud of 3/4 of the book hitting the counter rattled the contents inside and knocked watches and lockets off their plinths. Granny Sadie cleared her throat.
Ahem. Name?
Do you want my name? Or my brother's? That's who we need?
Eric's words faded to a squeak when a man, taller than Attila, ducked beneath the doorframe and stepped into the room. He wore a sharp black business suit, but his face hid beneath the black and gold painted skull of a boar. Somehow, Eric got the impression this was to make him less imposing, not more. As if whatever visage was hidden from them might cause spontaneous bouts of madness. In his long fingers, he held another ledger book, this one much smaller and much thinner, which he handed to the old lady.
Your name, you nincompoop.
Granny took the book, opened it to the middle, and pulled a pen from the jar of beads beside the register, licking the end.
Eric?
She paused, narrowing her one eye at him.
Pointy ears, vacant expression. Let me guess.
She used her cane to point at a particular framed photo in a long line of similar portraits that sat beneath a golden plaque labeling them as Happy Customers.
This your brother?
He squinted to the gestured frame and reeled in shock. Eric's gaze flew between the two, the old lady, then the photo of the clearly uncomfortable man with a fake smile, then back, before the words finally fell from his stunned mouth.
How do you know Vel? Never you mind that.
Granny Sadie slammed shut the book.
What trouble has that old toe fungus got himself into now?
The arrested kind,
Riggs supplied, replacing the hat on his head and flicking away the single tear that dared dribble from his eye.
Sounds about right.
The shriveled old woman shrugged.
Pay off the guard.
Eric could feel a migraine coming on.
We did. Let's just say it didn't take.
Huh. Tricky situation, then, going up against the madam like that.
Without further explanation, Granny Sadie hopped down from her stool. She made to step around the counter, but found her path blocked by her giant henchman, and she smacked him in the shins with her cane, eliciting a terrified yelp.
Get out of the way, you big buffoon! I'm negotiating here!
She ambled into view, stopping before the three of them.
All right, so, for a job like this, you're gonna want to hire my best merc. They ain't cheap, but...
I don't have any, money. The words escaped Eric in a sheepish rush, his cheeks growing red. Granny folded her arms across her chest.
I don't do freebies here, kid.
She then gestured to the door with an angry nod.
Now get out!
Hang on. Eric attempted to remain put, but Mr. Black's long fingers found their way around the collar of his shirt and began to haul him towards the exit.
There's a
robot!
Brig cut him off before the idiot could spill the beans.
A portable robot. Yep, in a junkyard up topside.
Not Trashbot! Attila's entire being slumped in dismay. A greedy, surprised smile overtook Sadie's features, and she held up a hand.
Hold it right there.
She scuttled a few feet to close the distance.
Your brother's been buying parts from me for the better part of a year now.
She looked up, displaying that gold-toothed grin.
You telling me he's got it finished?
I finished it, Attila butted in, crossing his arms petulantly over his chest. But yeah, it works. Eric's gaze flickered from the fingers still wrapped around his shirt down to the old woman.
Is that enough to hire us a merc?
Tell you what.
She held out a hand.
I'll offer you my friends and family discount, but only if you promise to put in a good word with your brother. I have a thing for damaged goods.
Eric wrinkled his nose.
However, an IOU for your brother's robot is still not enough to risk my best. But there is someone new on my payroll who is very eager to prove himself.
Sadie cupped her hands around her mouth and yelled,
"Hey, kid, get in here!"
She looked back up at the elf and held her pudgy hand out for him to shake. But when he failed to take it, she gave it a little wiggle.
"Don't be scared. I only bite if you ask nicely."
Still, oh so very confused, Eric could do nothing but reach down and take that hand in an agreement shake. What was the worst that could happen? Thank you for listening to Of Monsters and Mushrooms, the rewrite of Book 1 by Lesley Herron. Join us as we post new chapters roughly every other week. If you would like to listen to the entire book or her other novels in the series, you can do so at talltaletv.com/series or by using the link in the description.
I still don't understand why we have to take the stairs all the way down.
Because we can't risk anyone spotting Attila. Just be happy Frankie still let him leave.
Yeah, dude has crazy anger issues.
My legs can't take this. They're holding up a lot more mass than either of you. How many more floors are there?
I don't know. I can check. Hey, Veronica?
Don't you
How
dare.
may I be of assistance?
How many more floors to reach the bottom?
You currently have 28 more floors to descend. Would you like me to plot a
28.
We heard. Dang it, Attila, why you gotta do that?
Do what? You mean this?
How may I be of assistance?
Yes, that. You know eyeball stuff freaks me out.
Hey, guys, you know
Really?
we're walking downstairs,
so I
right?
shouldn't do this
How may I be of...
anymore?
No!
Guys, maybe
Why not?
focus on walking.
How may I be...
It's my eye.
How may I be... How may...
Oh my
How-
God, stop
how may
that!
I-
I'm gonna
how
be
may I-
sick.
Hold on. I just need to pop it out of my head and hit the reset button.
Do what now?
Just gotta dig my
Make sure to turn it off before...
Oh, God.
Oh, dizzy. I can still see out of it.
Let go of me. You might touch me with
let go.
Whoa.
Shoulder, liver, let's play. Turn it off before you take it out.
I'm okay.